Well, thank you, and good evening to all of you. Today, we have the privilege and honor of welcoming to our campus one of our country's, indeed one of the world's most distinguished writers. She's here to speak to us about her novels and her work. We are thrilled to have Professor Toni Morrison visiting our university. Good applause. Yes. On behalf of all of us who form the George Washington University community, I want to extend the warmest welcome possible to Professor Morrison. Earlier today, she and others gathered in front of Lisner Auditorium to dedicate a bench as part of her Bench on the Road project. This program commemorates the history of African American people by placing benches at historic locations throughout the United States and abroad. We're deeply touched and honored that we here at George Washington University are a part of this great initiative. Dr. Terry Reed, who joined our university as our first Vice Provost for Diversity and Inclusion, will have more to say about this project, and of course, more to say about Toni Morrison's life and her work. It is now my distinct pleasure to invite Dr. Reed to this podium to set the context for tonight's program and to introduce our distinguished speaker. Welcome.
Wow. The GW community, in all of its rich diversity, has come together tonight to celebrate the extraordinary life and work of Professor Toni Morrison. After reading and teaching courses, discussing perhaps jazz or beloved, after going to the gym, spending hours in research labs and administrative offices, or in front of a computer trying to craft the perfect sentence or thought for a thesis or book chapter, after feeding the kids, arranging pickups, meeting editorial deadlines, speaking to or praying for our families, and after participating in a bench dedication ceremony on the day declared Toni Morrison Day by the District of Columbia City Council, we have gathered in this place. Key aspects of this classroom's history, for tonight we are all GW students, is an important element of the learning we hope will take place. President Knapp routinely reminds us that where our campus is situated contributes greatly to the value of a GW education. He admonishes our students to take full advantage of the front row seats they now have to the unfolding national and international drama that is America. Let us take note then of the significance of place as it relates to tonight's event. Not too many years ago, this auditorium had a policy of excluding Black audiences, and in response to complaints of discrimination, moved to the less blatant practice of not allowing performances that might draw a mixed audience. That history shapes the substance of our presence here tonight. I hope you had the opportunity to view the displays that hang in the lobby depicting this venue's history and the historical experience of African Americans at GW. If not, I encourage you to take a moment before you leave to explore the wonderful exhibit put together by our friends at Gelman Library. Reflecting on race and the distinctive experiences of Black people on our campus and in America, with all of its contradictions, is an indispensable element in a preparation for life and leadership in this country and in the world. Tonight's program was made possible in partnership with the Toni Morrison Society, the English Department, Office of the Provost, Women's Leadership Program, Alumni Relations, Multicultural Student Services Center, Gelman Library Special Collections Research Center, and External Relations. Please help me thank them, the Office of the Provost, and the Planning Committee, in particular Robert Snyder, for organizing this event. I would also like to extend a special thank you to Evelyn and Scott Schreiber, who donated the spectacular bench that now sits in front of Lisner Auditorium. As Provost Lerman said, the Bench by the Road project is a memorial history and community outreach initiative of the Toni Morrison Society. That project sets out to remedy the absences of historical markers that help all of us to remember the lives of Africans who were enslaved and of how Professor Morrison's haunting and amazing novel, Beloved, served this symbolic role. The bench at GW is the 6th to be installed, and it is placed in remembrance of the racial separation, segregation, and eventual integration of Lisner Auditorium. As Professor Morrison speaks about her life and reads from her work, we are her students and not just an audience. I say this because to me, Professor Morrison is first and foremost a teacher, a master teacher, in fact. Through her novels, librettos, lyrics, courses, structured and impromptu lectures, as well as with the totality of her life in all its pain and glory, she pushes us to think about the jagged edges of our experience, to reflect and to recollect on the nastiness and beauty of life. You cannot listen to or observe her and not be struck and humbled by her wisdom and genius. Reading Sula and the Bluest Eye as a young girl, never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that our paths would cross at Princeton University, and that I would have the honor to be in her presence as she challenged and on occasion chastised her students and colleagues to do better and to be better. I look back at this part of my life story and say to myself, truth is better than fiction. Well, maybe not Toni Morrison fiction. Professor Morrison is no stranger to Washington, D.C. She studied and taught at Howard University. She recently celebrated a milestone birthday earlier this year at the Library of Congress and will return there during this visit to participate in the National Book Festival activities. There, she will receive the Library of Congress's National Book Festival Award for Creative Achievement, organized by the Library of Congress Center for the Book. Toni Morrison is the Robert F. Goheen Professor in the Humanities Emerita, Special Consultant to the Director of the Princeton Atelier, and lecturer with the rank of professor in the Lewis Center for the Arts at Princeton University. Looking to provide her students opportunities to engage in real-life work and professional artists across various art fields, Ms. Morrison created the Atelier at Princeton University in 1993. Her 9 major novels have received extensive critical acclaim. She received the National Book Critics Award in 1978 for Song of Solomon, and the 1988 Pulitzer Prize for Beloved. In 1993, Ms. Morrison was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. In 2006, Beloved was chosen by the New York Times Book Review as the best work of American fiction published in the last quarter century. To add to her list of accomplishments, Ms. Morrison has also written lyrics that have been commissioned by Carnegie Hall for world-renowned artists Kathleen Battle and Jesse Norman. After all of these great accomplishments, I am happy to say she is not done yet. In addition to speaking about her life and work and reading from her latest novel, A Mercy, Professor Morrison will read excerpts from her as yet untitled forthcoming work. She has also agreed to answer some questions from the audience, much like the teacher, as I've already described. Please join me in welcoming to the stage a prolific writer, vibrant intellectual, and extraordinary human being, Professor Toni Morrison.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Because I have on one of these Beyonce, lovelier things. I'm delighted to be back in Washington. I have some rather special feelings about this town. It's so different in many ways and so very much alike in other ways. I came here in 1949 in defiance of the only person in my family to ever have gone to college. And when he heard that I was interested in doing this, he suggested I go to Ohio State University because I'm from Ohio. He went there to state school. It wasn't all that far from where I lived. And I just thought that was not such a hot idea. Not because I knew anything really a lot about it, he did, but I really wanted to be in the company of black intellectuals. I thought that would be marvelous. I had been taught by some good teachers, some mediocre, but none black. Never lived in a black neighborhood. And I thought this was the best place to be. They were interested, my family, in sending me away to college. They promised to fund me for 1 year, 3/4. That they thought they could do. After that, it was up to me. So I thought that was a pretty good deal. So I came. I have to say, there were some fabulous teachers here, but as far as being a student, the most exciting place for me, even though I majored in English and minored in humanities, what they called humanities classics, the place that was most exciting for me was in the theater. Not because I was any good. I wasn't. I did one play perfectly. All the rest were embarrassments. But the interesting thing was that we read plays indifferently, not to interpret for paper, but to understand the whole, the scene, the character, the relationships. It was just a different kind of reading. And for years afterwards, even now, I read plays, buy them and read them, because I don't always like the way they're performed. But if I read them, then I can kind of make it up myself. At any rate, the theater was an important thing for me. And then there was a group of people in Washington. Some were faculty members, some were guest faculty, who had a writing club. There were 6 or 7 or 8 or 9. Owen Dodson and Ann Cook and John Lavelle and 6 or 7, and some people were from Broadway. Some were painters, some were poets, some were historians. Mae Miller, who was a local poet. Anyway, they had this once a month meeting, and I went, and I brought to the meetings old stuff, things you wrote when you were a freshman or when I was teaching here by then, by the way. And they wouldn't let you keep coming if you didn't have anything new. And I had run out of old stories I wrote 10 years ago. that weren't any good. I had to write something new. And I was eager to go because they had such good food. I mean, it was really, they put on a spread. So I wrote this story about a young girl who had prayed for blue eyes and never got them. At the time I wrote that, it was just a little, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 pages. I was thinking about something that was true in my own life when I was a kid, about a girl that I knew. She and I were close friends, and she had said that. We had quarreled a little bit about whether there was a God. And I, you'll be happy to know, was convinced there was. And she was convinced there wasn't. And she had proof. And the proof was she had prayed for 2 years for blue eyes, and he had not provided them. And I remember looking at her, thinking, suppose she had gotten them, how grotesque it would be. And then realized right after that she was really quite beautiful. I was telling somebody today, at that age you don't really know beauty. You know, cute or nice but just that. And I didn't realize that she was. First time I ever noticed. Anyway, so I wrote that. And they sort of liked it. I had a good meal. And then I went home. And then I left Howard, got a job as a publisher in an educational publishing house in Syracuse. And I just picked that story up. This was years later. And I was under the impression, this is like, I don't know, what is it, 70s? And everything was black is beautiful and get rid of whitey and stuff that everybody was, snick. And I was going, wait a minute. You are my black queen. I said, hold on. Hold on. You don't remember? Anyway, it was the kind of book that I wished had been written. And nobody had written it. So I thought, I'll take this little story, which didn't work at all because the person in the center was so inarticulate and so unaware that she couldn't hold the story. So I surrounded her with, friends and a family and other people and so on. Now, the important thing is I sent it out to a couple of publishers, and I got letters. I wish I had kept those letters. I got letters back that said, most of them said, thanks a lot, but no thanks. And once in a while, an editor would take the time to explain why they didn't want it. And I remember one that said, this book has no beginning, no middle, and no end. And I thought, what? But the interesting thing was that I thought all those negative things, there were about 12 of them. I thought they were all wrong. It never occurred to me that their judgment was right. So anyway, eventually I got someone to take it because there was a commercial market for African American men writing, Man Child in the Promised Land and Blood in My Eye and, all that. And it was right in there. No, but not this. So I thought, So they just did it. And then the editor left anyway, so he just sort of floated there in that house. And I thought, well, 500 people will read this. I was pretty right because I think they printed 3,000 copies and sold maybe 1,200. I was very excited about that. And then City University in New York, there was a concurrent women's movement, and they decided that every student who went to CUNY, the City University of New York, had to read certain books by women and by African Americans. And The Bluest Eye was one. Can you believe that if every human being who went to City University of New York had to read The Bluest Eye year after year after year after year, that's a huge sale. So this little book, they had sort of dismissed it. If you ever get a first edition of that, you will not see any biography. It's just this little thing on the flap that I wrote about the story, no bio, because I was working at Random House then, and I didn't think it was a good idea to be writing and publishing. They didn't hire me to be a writer. They hired me to acquire books, and it was all stupid. And the big picture of me on the back. Anyway, the paperback house didn't have any more books. They had sold out their little 4,500 or whatever. So all of a sudden, this order comes in from City, and they have to repeat because it's required reading. So therein lies the success. But the point of the story is this: after that book was accepted, I went into this very, very deep sadness. I had 2 children. They were the light of my life. But there really was nothing else. I went to work. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is that there was this call of darkness. And I realized that I didn't have anything to think, that I missed writing. It taken me 5 years to write The Bluest Eye, that little book, because I was so much enjoying it, enjoying the writing of it, that I wasn't rushing toward a deadline. And then I realized that one of the things that was bothering me was I didn't have another writing idea. And then I thought of Sula, that thing, and everything in the world began to look coherent to me again. Even that which was incoherent or bad was useful. It's all territory. It's all information. It's all, you can use or not use all of it. So the point being, I am very happy when I'm writing, or even if I'm not writing, if I have an idea about something I want to write, and it sort of pulls me together intellectually, spiritually, just in every way. Language does that for me. Anyway, so I've always recognized since then what that posthumous, postpartum depression was after, writing a book. So I don't worry about it anymore, although recently I have. At any rate, I don't know if I've been going on too long. I organized this thing to do 10 minutes of this, 20 minutes of that, and then the rest in Q&A. So I don't know. Did I go over? No one knows. No one cares. It's okay. Well, the thing is, having an idea, just a question. I don't know about this. Is this really true? Or I see something written in a little piece of paper that seems to me to hit something very current, like when I wrote Paradise. It was because I was reading about black newspapers in Oklahoma and the advertisements that they were putting in those. There were like 50 black newspapers, and there were all these colored towns. And one of the ads said, "Come prepared or not at all." Don't come if you don't have any money. Don't come if you need. So I thought, oh, that's mean. What about all these slaves? They were ex-slaves, right, going west. And they'll tell me they would get to a little town and nobody would take them in, you know. So that idea of constructing black towns was fascinating to me in Paradise. And other ideas that just questions, what was that like? What must that have felt like? When I did A Mercy, I was really interested, as I was explaining to some students about when did racism become so much the law of the land and associated with slavery, as though black slaves were this brand new idea. Slavery was everywhere. I mean, all the empires rested on slavery. Greece, Rome, Turkey, England, Russia, Europe in general. That's who did that work. They called them something else, and peons, but they worked the land and it went on for generations. So it wasn't like that was some brand new idea that just it was invented in America. But what happened to make it associated with chattel slavery and race? Because they had indentured servants whose children were also indentured, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so I had to go back to a time before racism was established and institutionalized. Because, you know, nobody's born like that. So what is it? When did it really get legalized, institutionalized? And that was interesting to me. So I had to go back to 17th century, 1690, because in 1692 were the Salem witch trials. So the friction was about religion, not race. It was powerfully this religion. Mine is good, yours is not. You get to hang, you know, yeah, whatever. So that put me back there. And then the problem became, who's going to tell this story? So when I figured that out, I was very happy with what I thought was my little smart idea. But I had no voice for this girl. I didn't know what she sounded like, because she was born a slave, Portuguese plantation. She's taught to read and write by a Catholic priest. And she comes up north. So anyway, instead of trying to do what they call a language of the period, or some dialect that I couldn't even invent, I found her voice by simply making sure she only spoke in the present tense. She doesn't use the past tense. On the one hand, it made her young, in my view. That is, young people, it's always now. There's no past, there's no future. It's like now. So she talks that way. And so in developing it, and then I began to like that voice. I began to really like it, as opposed to the other sort of traditional voices. So I'm going to read from the opening and the end. I'll tell you why I'm going to read the beginning and the end. It doesn't matter if you haven't read it, because reading the end doesn't tell you anything. Okay, I think you should get the address. Who's she talking to? Don't be afraid. She's talking to a reader? No. But anyway, I hope it becomes clear who she has to persuade and at the same time sort of situate the story. Don't be afraid. My telling can't hurt you in spite of what I have done. And I promise to lie quietly in the dark, weeping perhaps, or occasionally seeing the blood once more. But I will never again unfold my limbs to rise up and bare teeth. I explain. You can think what I tell you a confession if you like, but one full of curiosities, familiar only in dreams, and during those moments when a dog's profile plays in the steam of a kettle, or when a corn husk doll sitting on a shelf is soon splaying in the corner of a room, and the wicked of how it got there is plain. Stranger things happen all the time, everywhere. You know. I know you know. One question is, who is responsible? Another is, can you read? If a peahen refuses to brood, I read it quickly. And sure enough, that night, I see Amenemai standing hand in hand with her little boy, my shoes jamming the pocket of her apron. Other signs need more time to understand. Often there are too many signs, or a bright omen clouds up too fast. I sort them and try to recall, yet I know I am missing much, like not reading the garden snake crawling up to the door saddle to die. Let me start with what I know for certain. The beginning begins with the shoes. When a child, I'm never able to abide being barefoot and always long for shoes, always beg for shoes, anybody's shoes, even on the hottest days. My mother, Amenemai, is frowning, is angry at what she says are my pretty fly ways. Only bad women wear high heels. I am dangerous, she says, and wild, but she relents and lets me wear the throwaway shoes from Signora's house, pointy toe, one raised heel broke, the other worn, and a buckle on top. As a result, Lena says, my feet are useless, will always be too tender for life, and never have the strong soles, tougher than leather, that life requires. Lena is correct. Florence, she says, it's 1690. Who else these days has the hands of a slave and the feet of a Portuguese lady? So when I set out to find you, she and mistress give me sir's boots that fit a man, not a girl. They stuff them with hay and oily corn husks and tell me to hide the letter inside my stocking, no matter the itch of the sealing wax. I am lettered, but I do not read what mistress writes, and Lena in sorrow cannot. But I know what it means to say to any who stop me. My head is light with the confusion of two things, hunger for you and scare if I am lost. Nothing frights me more than this errand, and nothing is more temptation. From the day you disappear, I dream and plot to learn where you are and how to be there. I want to run across the trail through the beach and white pine, but I'm asking myself, which way? Who will tell me? who lives in the wilderness between this farm and you? And will they help me or harm me? What about the boneless bears in the valley? Remember how when they move their pelts, sway as though there's nothing underneath? Their smell belying their beauty, their eyes knowing us from when we are beasts also? You telling me that is why it is fatal to look them in the eye? They will approach, run to us, to love and play, which we misread and give back fear and anger. Giant birds are also nesting out there, bigger than cows, Lena says. And not all natives are like her, she says. So watch out. A praying savage, neighbors call her, because she is once church-going. Yet she bathes herself every day, and Christians never do. Underneath, she wears bright blue beads and dances in secret at first light when the moon is small. More than fear of loving bears or birds bigger than cows, I fear pathless night. How, I wonder, can I find you in the dark? Now, at last, there is a way. I have orders. It is arranged. I will see your mouth and trail my fingers down. You will rest your chin in my hair again while I breathe into your shoulder, in and out, in and out. I'm happy the world is breaking open for us, yet its newness trembles me. To get to you, I must leave the only home, the only people I know. Lena says from the state of my teeth, I am maybe 7 or 8 when I am brought here. We boil wild plums for jam and cake 8 times since then. So I must be 16. Before this place, I spend my days picking okra and sweeping tobacco sheds. My nights on the floor of the cookhouse with Amenamai. We are baptized and can have happiness when this life is done. Reverend Father tells us that. Once every 7 days, we learn to read and write. We are forbidden to leave the place, so the 4 of us hide near the marsh. My mother, me, her little boy, and Reverend Father. He is forbidden to do this, but he teaches us anyway, watching out for wicked Virginians and Protestants who want to catch him. If they do, he will be in prison or pay money or both. He has 2 books and a slate. We have sticks to draw through sand, pebbles to shape words on smooth, flat rock. When the letters are memory, we make whole words. I am faster than my mother, and her baby boy is no good at all. Very quickly, I can write from memory the Nicene Creed, including all of the commas. Confession we tell, not write, as I am doing now. I forget almost all of it until now. I like talk, Lena talk, Stone talk, even sorrow talk. Best of all is your talk. At first, when I am brought here, I don't talk any word. All of what I hear is different from what words mean to Amenamai and me. Lena's words say nothing, I know, nor mistress's. Slowly, a little talk is in my mouth and not on stone. Lena says the place of my talking on stone is Mary's land, where Sir does business. So that is where my mother and her baby boy are buried, or will be if they ever decide to rest. Sleeping on the cookhouse floor with them is not as nice as sleeping in the broken sleigh with Lena. In cold weather, we put planks around our part of the cowshed and wrap our arms together under pelts. We don't smell the cow flops because they are frozen and we are deep under fur. In summer, if our hammocks are hit by mosquitoes, Lena makes a cool place to sleep out of branches. You never like a hammock and prefer the ground, even in rain, when Sir offers you the storehouse. Sorrow no more sleeps near the fireplace. The men helping you, Will and Scully, never lived the night here because their master does not allow it. You remember them, how they would not take orders from you until Sir makes them. He could do that since they are exchange for land under lease from Sir. Lena says Sir has a clever way of getting without giving. I know it is true because I see it forever and ever. Me watching, my mother listening, her baby boy on her hip. Senor is not paying the whole amount he owes to Sir. Sir is saying he will take instead the woman and the girl, not the baby boy, and the debt is gone. And Minamai begs, no, her baby boy is still at her breast. Take the girl, she says. My daughter, she says. Me. Sir agrees and changes the balance due. As soon as tobacco leaf is hanging to dry, Reverend Father takes me on a ferry, then a ketch, then a boat, and bundles me between his boxes of books and food. The second day it becomes hurting cold, and I am happy I have a cloak, however thin. Reverend Father excuses himself to go elsewhere on the boat and tells me to stay exact where I am. A woman comes to me and says, stand up. I do, and she takes my cloak from my shoulders, then my wooden shoes. She walks away. Reverend Father turns a pale red color when he returns and learns what happens. He rushes all about, asking where and who, but can find no answer. Finally, he takes rags, strips of sailcloth lying about, and wraps my feet. Now I am knowing that unlike with Senor, priests are unloved here. A sailor spits into the sea when Reverend Father asks him for help. Reverend Father is the only kind man I ever see. When I arrive here, I believe it is the place he warns against, the freezing in hell that comes before the everlasting fire, where sinners bubble and singe forever. But the ice comes first, he says. And when I see knives of it hanging from the house and trees and feel the white air burn my face, I am certain the fire is coming. Then Lena smiled when she looks at me and wraps me for warmth. Mistress looks away, nor is Sorrow happy to see me. She flaps her hand in front of her face as though bees are bothering her. She is ever strange, and Lena says she is once more with child. Father still not clear, and Sorrow does not say. Will and Scully laugh and deny. Lena believes it is Sir's, says she has her reason for thinking so. When I ask her what reason, she says, he's a man. Mistress says nothing, neither do I. but I have a worry. Not because our work is more, but because mothers nursing greedy babies scare me. I know how their eyes go when they choose, how they raise them to look at me hard, saying something I cannot hear, saying something important to me, but holding the little boy's hand. Well, I was going to read the end, but I don't think I will. I'll read, I want to leave enough time for questions. And this thing's supposed to be over at 9, right? Is that right? Okay. Anyway, if you have time, I'll do it. But what I do want to do, as promised, because I'm interested in it, is read just a few pages of a book, the next novel that I'm writing. You'll be happy to know, I hope, that I finished it. And I have a title. And so I'm going to read you these few pages of the voice of the man who is, about whom the story is written. I'll tell you a little bit about the strategy because it might be of some interest. I wanted this voice to talk to me. I'm writing the story, me, right, author, and he's sort of correcting me, disagreeing, or just describing something, so that there's a kind of conversation that goes on. Not overwhelming, but every now and then he comes in between the so-called author and the subject. So this is his voice that opens the book, okay? They rose up like men. We saw them. Like men they stood. We shouldn't have been anywhere near that place. Like most farmland outside Lotus, Georgia, this here one had plenty scary warning signs. The threats hung from wire mesh fences with wooden stakes every 50 or so feet. But when we saw a crawl space that some animal had dug, a coyote maybe or a coon dog, we couldn't resist. Just kids we were. The grass was shoulder high for her and waist high for me. So looking out for snakes, we crawled through it on our bellies. The reward was worth the harm grass juice and clouds of gnats did to our eyes, because there, right in front of us, about 50 yards off, they stood like men, their raised hooves crashing and striking, their manes tossing back from wild white eyes. They bit each other like dogs. But when they stood, reared up on their hind legs, their forelegs around the withers of the other, we held our breaths in wonder. One was rust-colored, the other deep black, both sunny with sweat. The neighs were not as frightening as the silence following a kick of hind legs into the lifted lips of the opponent. Nearby, colts and mares, indifferent, nibbled grass or looked away. Then it stopped. The rust-colored one dropped his head and pawed the ground, while the winner loped off in an arc, nudging the mares before him. As we elbowed back through the grass, looking for the dugout place, avoiding the line of parked trucks beyond, we lost our way. Although it took forever to recite the fence, neither of us panicked until we heard voices, urgent but low. I grabbed her arm and put a finger to my lips. Never lifting our heads, just peeping through the grass, we saw them pull a body from a wheelbarrow and throw it into a hole already waiting. One foot stuck up over the edge and quivered as though it could get out, as though with a little effort it could break through the dirt being shoveled in. We could not see the faces of the men doing the burying, only their trousers. But we saw the edge of a spade driving the jerking foot down to join the rest of itself. When she saw that black foot with its creamy pink and mud-streaked sole being whacked into the grave, her whole body began to shake. I hugged her shoulders tight and tried to pull her trembling into my own bones because, as a brother, 4 years older, I thought I could handle it. The men were long gone, and the moon was a cantaloupe by the time we felt safe enough to disturb even one blade of grass and move on our stomachs, searching for the scooped out part under the fence. When we got home, we expected to be whipped or at least scolded for staying out so late. But the grown-ups didn't notice us. Some disturbance had their attention. And since you're set on telling this story, and since you're set on telling my story, whatever you sing and whatever you write down, know this: I really forgot about the burial. I only remembered the horses. They were so beautiful, so brutal, and they stood like men.
If you're interested in asking Professor Morrison a question, please make your way to the center aisle where Mr. Golden will assist you. Please state your name, where you're from, and keep your comment or question brief. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Becca Daniels. I'm a student here at GW, and I was wondering what your reaction was to the New York Times headline after the 2008 presidential election, which stated Obama elected president as racial barrier falls. And do you believe the American perspective has changed on race over the past 3 years, or perhaps will change?
Well, some of it has changed. That's a hard... listen, racism pays. It's useful. It works. You don't find anybody writing an editorial column or on television that has something nice to say about the president. It doesn't pay. Nobody wants to hear it. Also, racism is expensive, very expensive. You have to have 2 toilets instead of 1. But it has always worked because you don't have to talk about class. You only talk about race in this country. so it's going to be very hard to just get rid of that because it almost has nothing to do with people's real feelings. You know, remember, I don't know if you wouldn't remember, you're too young, but I remember during the civil rights movement, the problem, they didn't mind if the white people of the South, so-called South, they didn't care if they stood next to a black person. They just didn't want to sit next to the black person. You know, it was a sort of a horizontal thing. I mean, you look at it sort of logically, it's one of those strange things that exist in this country and in some other countries. But if it didn't work, they'd give it up that it works. And as far as the politics is concerned, I have some strong feelings about the current nature of the political scene. And then as soon as I think I grabbed it, something else happens and I don't understand it anymore. So I can't answer the question completely, but I can tell you that it never occurred to me that race disappeared, or racism, not race, disappeared just because they elected Barack Obama to the White House.
Okay, sorry. Hello, Professor Morrison. Thanks for coming. My name is Ramzi. I'm a senior here at GW, and my question is, in one of my classes, we saw an interview you gave to C-SPAN where you said that you didn't think Beloved or The Bluest Eye was age appropriate for a lot of middle schoolers and high schoolers who read it in required reading programs. And my question is, given the movies, TV shows, and music my generation listens to, do you really still think that's true? And on the topic of required readings, do you think there's any books that should be added or taken off the current list that are in our public schools?
Well, you know, you're right about, when I said that, I was not thinking about all of the blatant sexuality and murder and blood and guts that are routine on television. And there's a little, I guess, restraining order, like this is not fit for everyone or something. But at the time, you know, The Bluest Eye was banned everywhere in schools. And I even got a letter, which I put on my bathroom wall, from the Texas Correctional Institution, which had banned Song of Solomon from the prison library. And they had little blocks about why they banned different books, and mine was because it might start a prison riot. So I felt I had accomplished something. I had written a book that might just inflame a whole prison. But what I was sort of my sister did not permit her children to read The Bluest Eye until they were 17 years old. My sister. So I just couldn't start saying, oh, everyone should. My feeling is that people should read anything and everything. And you can't be frightened of dirty words. I mean, what kind of brain is that? You're scared because somebody said, I mean, it's unbelievable. But there's so many brilliant books that are on the no-read list, Ulysses, you know, Goodbye Columbus, you know, everything worth reading is banned by somebody in the schools. So that's why I may have been a little flip when I had that answer on CNN. But my feeling is that, you know, I don't feel these things compete with one another. Who wants a book that is not alive? It's designed, you know, there is a certain kind of level of children's books, and I'm not sure at what level anybody should read anything. I remember being in the 6th grade, and since I could read for a long, long time, before I went to school, And I remember being in the 6th grade, the teacher had told us to bring a book from home to read. I bought in this book called A Strange Woman. And it was interesting, except I didn't know what they were talking about. And it was made into a movie later with Hedy Lamarr. And the book was about a woman who liked, what do you call it when they like to be beaten? Masochism. Yeah, her. So every now and then, something, and she would go in the garage and her husband would hit her. I don't know. And I was going, and the teacher said to me, I don't think you should be reading that book. And so she took it away and she gave me Tom Sawyer. Which I had read like 3 years before. So I was sitting there going, so I guess she was trying to protect me, I don't know. But the funny thing was that I didn't understand the book anyway. You know, the real subtlety of masochistic, sexual, whatever, I don't know. My mother joined the Literary Guild. We had all kinds of books in the house. Some of them were good and some of them were horrible. So I don't think you should curtail the inquisitive mind of a child.
Thank you. Thank
Sure.
you. We have time for 2 more questions, really, because the evening's running late. We could be here till 11 o'clock tonight, but we did promise Ms. Morrison that we would end this program by about 9, so we're running over time. 9-ish. So thank you for standing in line for the questions, but we'll take these 2. We'll begin here.
My name's Christina Mueller, and I'm a former GW English student. Professor Morrison, welcome back to DC.
Thank you.
I live in a small community, a small rapidly gentrifying community called LaDroit Park beneath Howard University. And my question for you is, in a community that is changing so quickly, what is your advice to this city and to my community about how to graciously move through this transition with its implicit and explicit racism through gentrification?
You know, I don't really know. Somebody asked me that in Vienna about Harlem. And she said, I understand all the mom and pop stores are gone, all the numbers runners are gone, it's terrible, it's awful, because Walmart's up there, somebody, you know, and rich or upper middle class white people are buying all the big houses and so on, lawyers and so on. And I told her, I mean, I was being flipped, and I said, oh, just get over it. Things change. The place used to be Dutch, you know, before. Before, you know, it became all black. I come from such a mixed town, with so many immigrants from Poland and Italy and Czechoslovakia, and black people and Mexican people. And I could read and speak English fairly well, so I was all, and my last name at that time was toward the end of the alphabet. So I always sat next to Nunzio Zano and all these, you know, Zawicki's and people who didn't speak English. And I, you know, kids learn English real fast, so they always put me next to those, you know, immigrant kids. So anyway, I didn't feel that until I came to Washington. Did I feel the power of segregation, cultural segregation, until I came to this city, you know. And I thought the whole world was like Lorain, Ohio, you know. Oh, you know, even when I went to New York, I thought that. No, it's not. But, you know, I think you have to not make it an either-or choice. You have to do what's comfortable and ethical and generous in your life. And neighborly, exactly.
Thank you. Well, we have time for one more. These questions are sensational. Wish we could go on all night, but your name and where you're from.
I'm Akbar Montesser. I'm chemistry professor. I've been here 30 years and 36 years as a professor, but in your presence, I'm a student. I have a question. I think I have read half of your books. And in these books, and also in the other black scholars, you rarely find to discuss a problem in this country. In 1981, the number of prisoners were about 100,000, if we trust Google. And approximately, we have 2 million prisoners right now. We have 5% of all population, but we have 25% of world prisoners. So it's really strange that we talk about human rights, but we neglect it all the way at home. And regrettably, the scholars at home completely forget about it. So when you read Beloved, I think it would be very lovely to see the story of these prisoners and what happens.
Well, you're right about the subject matter and the outrageous absence of human rights, and also the preponderance of nonviolent crime people in it who had a little marijuana or something, and the courage and the private prison industry, which is growing, needs prisoners. I mean, you know, it needs them the way it needs food. So the more people they can criminalize, you know, whether they're illegal immigrants or some young black men or some children, the merrier, because they get money. That's a way in which, as I was saying before, race works, because you get to put all those people in there and so on. And also they work. They got prisons in Texas where when you leave the prison, you owe money for room and board, because they're private prisons, you know, they're not. Anyway, so you're right about that. And I don't know how to, it's not an interesting story, fictionally speaking, to me. It's an interesting idea. It's a sociologically powerful thing to examine. You know, I'm a very close friend of Angela Davis, and that's all she does is work on prison stuff and have organizers and books and so on. But I've never found it compelling fictional material. I might do at some point, but so far not.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Morrison. Please join me in thanking Professor Morrison one last time.
Will do.
One more.
She says she'll take the one last question.
Ms. Morrison, the next president of the United States.
Thank you. Hello, Ms. Morrison.
Hello.
I'm Tashiana. I'm a student from Howard University. On behalf of the class of 2014, I'd like to say we are anxiously awaiting your return to the university. I just wanted to ask you, what's your writing process like, and which of your novels did you most enjoy writing, and what do you feel makes a good novel?
The process varies. I don't write if it's not there. I mean, I don't write every day just because I have the time. If I don't have the scene or the dialogue or the picture or something, if it's not clear, I don't write. And the more I write, the more economical I can be. I know when the writing, I didn't always know when I was writing badly in the beginning. I would write and write and write, and it was like horrible, and then I'd have to throw it away and then do something else. But now I know how to skip the bad writing and just go straight to what I really want to say. So that process is very, you know, it's routine. I write very, very early in the morning before, you know, anybody's up. I start, so I can be finished by noon. And so that's the process. And you asked me, you didn't ask me about a favorite book. You said, how do I?
Novel did you most enjoy writing?
Oh, well, always the one I'm doing now. I mean, the one I just read from. Ah! Perfection.
People down here are asking what the name of the novel is.
Home.
Home.
That's a hard one to remember.
I know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
And
time.
thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. I get this thing off. Thank you. Nice.
Thank you
Nice,
very
nice,
much for
nice.
coming. Please view the exhibits in the lobby. Good night.